gardening for wildlife in an era of climate change. This talk is being sponsored by the Chelmsford Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee. Our mission is to guide the select board on actions the town can take to reach zero greenhouse gas emissions by mid-century. Same goals that the state has. So you might wonder with this mission, why is our committee sponsoring a talk on gardening? Well, for several reasons. First, we all learned in school about the carbon dioxide, the oxygen cycle. We learned that plant life is vital for the existence of all animals. And so this is definitely on our sustainability radar. Also, anyone with a yard can start to act. Reintroduce native plants reach development as largely eliminated. Over millions of years, native plants and native wildlife, birds, pollinators, insects, became a working system, elaborate, interconnected system. And thinking more sustainably, thinking and acting more sustainably is a key to reaching our mission's goal. So now I will introduce our speaker, Trevor Smith. He has 20 years of field experience as a regenerative landscape designer and holds several landscape certifications. He is also past president of the Ecological Landscape Alliance and a current trustee. He is currently the design and education manager at Weston Nurseries. So please try to welcome Trevor.
Thank you so much. Are we able to take the lights down at all? Just because it's a slide presentation and I want you to be able to see it. There we go. That's prettier, isn't it? All right. All right. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be giving this talk. As you know, my name is Trevor Smith. I am the Design and Education Manager currently at Weston Nurseries, but I have been in love with nature and the landscape since I can remember. The love was instilled in me through my grandmother when I was very small, and we spent a lot of time outdoors, and she would wait endlessly sitting on a rock while I circled the vernal pool with a homemade net, digging up whatever I could, tadpoles, dragonfly larvae. I would just put the net in and see what I could find. So before we really get into the presentation, I want you to focus on this slide, because this slide really sums up, really, I guess, my love for nature. And this is one of the things that I absolutely love for nature, and the fact that we're getting into fall is a perfect time for this. This picture was taken last fall, and this is what I love about this picture. So we all know that no two snowflakes are the same. However, no two leaves are ever the same. And so I'm going to get into exactly what I love. So you'll have a maple tree leaf out every single year. No two leaves are ever the same. So there are phenomena like this picture that happen in nature. So no two ice crystals are ever the same. So I happen to be, I'm always the first one at Weston Nurseries, just as the sun was rising. And this is what makes nature so special, because I happened to be there. I saw this leaf, a one-of-a-kind leaf, sitting there in the lawn, surrounded by all of these ice crystals, the morning frost, and I was able to snap this picture. Now, this is the only time we can share this picture. And this is what is just so beautiful about it, because as soon as the sun came up over the trees, all those ice crystals melted, and the wind blew and everything else, and by mid-afternoon, that leaf was gone. So what is so beautiful and so special about this to me is that I was the only one to see it. Nobody else was there to share that image, and I was the only one to actually experience this. If you are in your backyard and nobody else is standing there, and the leaves are falling from the trees in autumn, you are the only person to see that one-of-a-kind leaf take its last trip down to the earth before it decomposes. And that, to me, is just so beautiful, because if you are paying attention to nature, and if you are in tune with things, and if you just allow yourself to observe, you get to witness dozens and dozens of one of a kind, once in a lifetime opportunities that many people won't, will never be able to share with you. And that to me is just this beautiful, wonderful gift that just draws me in every time. For instance, just like this photo, because every time I look at this photo, I can feel this, the day warming behind me as the sun's coming up and cracking through the large trees. And I remember seeing this leaf and just seeing all the frost everywhere. It was the first frost. So it was just, it was extremely beautiful. And every time I look at this, it's like, now I can share it with you. And that's awesome. But the actual moment itself was mine. And that to me is just a beautiful thing. So we are going to be talking about creating habitat in the era of climate change. And why is this important? Well, this is important because through our actions, for good, for better, for worse, through our actions, we have thrown things out of balance. So Mother Nature is more than capable of taking care of herself. However, because things are out of balance, she needs a little help. In that same vein, because we were the ones that made the mess, it is kind of our responsibility to clean it up. Now, we have this wonderful privilege as human beings. So every other organism on this planet lives between here and here, between life and death. So we too live between life and death, but in between all of that, we get to make decisions. We have free will. We decided to build up our cities. We decided to invent things. We've decided to sit here tonight. We have this free will when everything else is just considering survival the entire time. So as I said, we have this decision, we have this responsibility, I feel, as human beings to be responsible, to be stewards of this planet. And if it means cleaning up some of the messes we've made, and some of them, were just because we didn't know any better, and now we know better. So it's not about shaming. Nobody should feel bad. Plastics have saved dozens and dozens of lives, but now some plastics are turning into problems. It's not a bad thing that we invented plastics, but it is our responsibility to think of how to do it better and how to clean up. This right here is just an image of one of my favorite lawn alternatives or ground covers. It is the native wild strawberry. What makes it an awesome lawn cover is because your lawn is green or brown. And this one is actually green, then it flowers, then it berries, then it turns red in the fall. That's so much interest for a lawn, I would have to say. And in the meantime, it provides life for dozens of different insects and many other different mammals along the way. So again, we're just talking about why should we be gardening for habitat? And as I said, it's all about restoring balance. We need to get back there, and because we have the power and the responsibility, it certainly should be with us. Because again, this is a one-of-a-kind moment. I'm up very early. So this was when the sun was coming up, and I saw this little tree frog just kind of hanging out and just waking up along with the sun in the morning, and this was another one of those one-of-a-kind moments that I just really enjoyed. But we want to have more of this, and we love seeing this image, and when we are privileged enough to be able to see images like this or share moments like this with nature, we really, we love it. We wrap ourselves up in it. However, we're making it harder and harder for ourselves to have these moments and share these moments. For instance, this guy used to be everywhere when I was growing up, the yellow-spotted salamander. Now it is rarer and rarer just due to habitat loss. If you find salamanders on your property, that is Mother Nature's way of saying you are doing it right, because this is actually an indicator species. And you will not find salamanders necessarily on your property if the environment isn't right. If the water is off, if the water quality is off, if there are any chemical uses on your property or in the vicinity, you will not find this little gal hanging out on your property. So if you have the privilege of seeing one, then it's Mother Nature's way of telling you that you're doing it right. Not everybody likes to see this lady right here, but she is certainly very important to the landscape. And of course, we all know this one right here. Now, you will learn, if any of you have seen my pollinator talk, you will all know that this is one of the worst pollinators out there, but happens to be the poster child for all things pollinator. That is okay, because the importance, this picture right here and the monarch butterfly is probably the most relatable example to why we need to do what we need to do. I really had 2 things on my bucket list. I still only have 2 things on my bucket list. It's a very small bucket. I'm almost afraid to complete it because I don't know what happens when you complete that. So the one was to actually see the glaciers before they went away, and I got to experience the glaciers. I'll share that in a little bit. The other was to go to Mexico and see all the monarchs and just see the trees laden with monarch butterflies. Well, that goal is actually dwindling more and more because the monarch populations are depleting more and more. Even though many of us are now planting natives and we're really trying, everything is moving faster than we can catch up. If you liken it to technology, technology is moving a whole lot faster than technological security is moving along. So it's all happening very quickly. But that does not leave us powerless. And this is what this talk is all about. I'm hoping to inspire you and empower you to take action on your own, on your own postage stamp, on your own balcony, whatever it is you may have. And I'm really hoping that you will leave actually caring a little bit more. It all starts with this. Somewhere along the way, we forgot we were animals. Somewhere along the way, we became apart from nature. And so to get back to this mindset and to get back to where we need to be, we need to remember that we are a part of nature. We are just another animal on this planet. Just like a frog, just like a cat, just like the spider. We are just another creature on this planet. We are, like I said, we have a different responsibility, but we are no better or worse than any other creature. We have just as much right to be here as they do. So once you start considering that and thinking like that, you begin to see nature differently. You begin to look at our actions of rodenticides and pesticides and things, the actions that we take kind of on nature, and you look at them a little differently because that's a creature that has just as much right to be here as you do. So to start by, you start by asking yourself, do I want to be a land steward or do I want to be a land tyrant? How do I feel? What do I want to do? I'm sure, of course, your instant, response is, well, I want to be a land steward. Well, if everybody asked themselves this question, maybe things would be a little differently now. Do I just want to garden, or do I want to make a difference and help save the planet? Are you just out there puttering around in the garden, or do you want to turn your garden, into a catalyst for change and to actually be a part of the solution? Again, you can do it from your balcony, you can do it from dozens of acres, whatever your property size might be, you have the ability to change that little space into a positive change for the planet. And then if we all get together and start doing that, it certainly adds up. Small steps, big impact was the kind of tagline on the very first slide. So I look at it like this. Throughout the entire course of the season, I basically start working end of March, beginning of April, and I end about mid-November. I affect about 100 acres of land. I work on that many properties. I work on about 100 acres of land. Well, that's a lot of land. So I could be at your house, and you might have 1/8 of an acre. Okay, well, that's not much. And you might be like, oh, that's not much. But if I'm working at your house, and we're increasing habitat at your house, and then I have 99, more plus acres, to work on, that actually makes a huge impact. And then if all of you who don't get to see me during the year start doing that, then the impact just grows and grows. So like I said, this is all about empowerment. So in the introduction, we talked about me being a regenerative land care professional. So oftentimes people will call them eco-landscapers. A regenerative land care professional is a little bit different. And it comes down to the term of sustainability. So for a regenerative land care professional like myself, sustainability is a goal that we want to get to. It is not something we're practicing now. If we're practicing sustainability now, we're in a lot of trouble because dozens of species are going extinct all the time or becoming endangered all the time. Our water is degrading all the time. We went from just having oil and hydrocarbons and things in our water, and now we have microplastics in our water. Now we have PFAS in our water. Like we're progressively getting, so I don't want to sustain that. An easier way to put it, or a better way to put it, is if you are sick, if you have the flu, you don't want to sustain that. You want to regenerate. You want to get better. You want to heal. You want to get your systems back online and then sustain that. So that's what regenerative land care is all about. It is all about healing and restoring that balance within nature, and then you start sustaining. Because as I said, Mother Nature does need a little boost, and it is our responsibility to do that. But I mean, all in all, when things are right, Mother Nature can absolutely take care of herself. She took care of herself long before we started messing around. So she can absolutely do that again, but we need to take some action before that. And then we can start talking about sustainability. So I feel the sustainability discussion is a little premature considering our environment and our climate right now. So which one of these guys is performing an ecosystem service? Well, obviously it is the spider, because you know what? The blowers, the mowers, the string trimmers, those are not ecosystem services. They might be lawn maintenance services or landscape maintenance services, but they are certainly not doing anything to boost our ecological value, to boost biodiversity. So again, it's just right now I'm just trying to change the lens a little bit, so when you go back out into your garden and when you're raking those leaves and you see that leaf fall, you're going to look at it differently. So if we can build this, which is absolutely beautiful, and it is, you know, this is Chicago right here, and it's beautiful to look at. It's a wonderful experience. It's amazing that, you know, the human mind evolved to make cool skyscrapers like this. And it's also amazing to think of all the thousands, if not millions, of people that are living their lives or doing their work in these buildings. There's just so much of that going on, and we were able to build all this. So that's pretty incredible. There we go. We have New York. Same thing happened. I mean, I'm pretty sure everybody here has probably been to New York City, you know, at least once. And it may or may not have driven you crazy, but it is magnificent as far as a feat of human technology and what we were able to accomplish there. But if we can do this, then we can rebuild this. We can start to preserve, plant, and rebuild these skyscrapers. We just have to care a little bit more, and we just have to consciously be aware of what we're doing. So this is really what we want to get back to. We also want to get back to some of this. It's not all about the skyscrapers. If we can build all of that, then we can build all of this. And that's where all of this comes down to, everything that we're going to be talking about today. So everything we're going to be talking about, what we're going to walk through really is just the environment, the current conditions of the environment, and how we can improve the environment to make it more conducive to sustain habitat and to begin to heal itself. Then we need to think about life cycles, and we need to think about life cycles of the habitat or of the creatures we are trying to attract and what we are trying to create. And to do all that, we need to come up with our habitat goals. What is it all about? What are we trying to do? We don't all have to have the same goal, and that's okay. But what is it all about and what we're trying to do? And by the end of this, like I said, you'll be able to leave here and probably start to think about your own habitat goals. So where do we start? The answer is beneath our feet. We start with the soil. That is where everything begins. That is where everything is sustained. We actually are soil. Well, you know, the food that we eat comes from the soil. So we are, by default, soil ourselves, and then we return to the soil. So the soil is definitely where you need to start. The basics of soil is very simple. Sand, silt, and clay is the mineral component. Then we have air space, we have space for water, and then we have soil organic matter. A very good friend of mine made this statement, which is one of the things that I knew, but it wasn't until somebody said it that I really began to understand it. Plants do not have the ability to digest soil. That was said by my friend Dan Kittredge, who is a regenerative farmer. So this is what you have to think about, because we think, okay, the root of the plant is touching the soil. It must be getting its nutrients from the soil. It must be digesting the soil. That is not the case. It's actually these guys right here. It is the nematodes, that little worm guy up top. It's the little protozoa, these guys down here. It's all of them. The fungi in the soil, the bacteria in the soil is actually what breaks down the organic matter, is actually what breaks down and dissolves the minerals in the soil that makes them water soluble for the plants to take them up. So without the life in the soil, the plant really can't get nutrients. It just holds roots in the soil. That's what fertilizer is all about. Fertilizer, we found a way to bypass these guys. So we actually disrupted the relationship between the plant and the soil life. And it's actually kind of an abusive relationship because you don't need friends, you just need me and this bag that I have right here that promises all of my dreams will come true within my garden. But that's really not the case. We just found ways to bypass this relationship. However, by doing that, we actually were detrimental to ourselves because that relationship right there is where climate resilience starts. So by nurturing the relationship between the plant and the soil and the community within the soil, we begin to build climate resilient landscapes. One of the biggest unrecognized contributors to habitat loss and climate change, something that we don't think about and something that I had never heard anybody say before until I overthought things, which is what I do. I overthink a lot, and that is compaction. I deal with compaction all the time as a landscape professional. I either work on homes, as you see in this picture, where soil is extremely compacted, or I work with companies, or I was part of a company, and we used machines. So we were almost working against ourselves because we were compacting the soil. What does compaction do? Well, what it does is it squishes all that air and water space out of the soil, reducing the soil to just the mineral component. Without air, without water, those little guys in the soil can't live. Preventing overcompaction, and this is something that I left in this presentation, and it's what I preach to all of the my professionals that I speak to. Preventing overcompaction should be the #1 priority. When a landscaper, when construction comes to your house, when you're building a new lot, and building new homes, preventing that compaction or having that in mind should be at the top of our list. And this is a couple reasons why, and this is kind of a little divergent, so I hope I still make time, but in that picture that you see with the house and in this other picture, what is happening here? Well, they've totally stripped the soil of all the organic matter. They've taken all the vegetation away. What is happening right now as we look at this picture? All the carbon dioxide in the soil is being released into the air. So we think CO2 in the air only comes from our tailpipes, that it only comes from fossil fuel. No, it comes from us continually releasing through different practices all the stored CO2 back into the atmosphere. When you're tilling, through farming practices, through great ag practices, we release all this carbon dioxide into the air. Through the way climate is changing. You know, we have California that is on fire every single year. All those trees burning are releasing carbon dioxide into the air. So it's not just fossil fuel. But when there's a wildfire, we don't think about it. That's an act of nature. However, we're not thinking that's adding to this. When we're building a new house lot, or when we're under construction, either via landscape or via a builder, when we're doing all that and we leave that soil naked like that and all that CO2 goes into the air, that is adding to the carbon dioxide problem in the air. But we don't look at it like that. We just say, ooh, that's construction. We may like it or we may not like it, but we're not putting 2 and 2 together and realizing that that is increasing the exact greenhouse gases and the problem that we have. So compaction, so if you have an addition built, or if you have a landscaper who just happens to drive a bobcat over your property, especially if your soil is wet, that can compact your soil 2 to 3 feet down. That is not going to get fixed with a little aerator that runs over your soil necessarily, at least not right away. That is what you need to do. That is a start, but that is not going to fix things right away. Compaction affects the hydrology. Compaction affects carbon sequestration. If there isn't any life in the soil, if there isn't any porosity in the soil, if there isn't any organic matter in the soil or any place to store carbon because we've squished it all out, then we can't sequester carbon back into the soil. It also really impacts biodiversity because we don't have that. If we don't have the life below, then we don't have the life above. Only certain things will live in this, like crabgrass and Japanese knotweed. And many of our invasives absolutely love these bare areas because they've developed ways to thrive in those areas. But our native plants did not grow up with bobcats or anything like that, compacting the soil or disturbing the soil. Now, just real quick with this picture, this is what we don't see. And this is what I tell all the designers. This is what you don't see. So this big machine in this picture has now compacted this soil to pretty much cement. What's going to happen is when the house is finished, they're going to put 4 inches of topsoil, of loam over it. They're going to seed it. And then the homeowner's going to move in, and they're going to say, I just spent X amount of dollars on this house, and I have wet spots in my lawn, or my stuff is dying, or I don't know why. It's a brand new house. Why won't my lawn drain? Why am I having all these problems? Well, that's because 4 inches down, you have concrete. Or what will happen is an unknowing landscape designer or yourselves will decide that you don't necessarily like the contractor special that was put at your foundation and that you want to build this garden. And you build this garden, but all of this that you see in the picture is actually dirt. This is dead. There is nothing happening in there. It's soil from the subsoils, from the excavation of the foundation. This is actually just the mineral component of soil. There's nothing there. So you put plants in trying to beautify your garden, but there is nothing there to support the plants. So this is because of what you don't see. It really is one of the causes of some of our landscape failures. The biggest difference between conventional and regenerative landscaping is whether or not you treat your soil like a living organism that constantly needs to be fed carbon via living plant roots. So we're going to kind of touch on the carbon cycle right now. So plants are photosynthesizing. As they're photosynthesizing, plants are making sugar. That's what the result of photosynthesis is. So they're making sugar or carbon. And then they send 20 to 80% of that carbon down into the soil to feed the soil life. The life in the soil, also carbon. This is actually carbon sequestration. This is how it works. So, I mean, we all hear carbon sequestration. We're like, oh, we're taking CO2 out of the atmosphere and putting it in the soil. But how does that actually work? It actually works by transforming that CO2 via sunlight and water into sugar, and then it gets pushed into the soil, and it feeds the life in the soil. The life in the soil being well fed makes more life in the soil, and then also the life cycle happens, and that life then dies in the soil. Now that's sequestered carbon. That little dead body, way down in the soil is sequestered carbon. All that life, same thing. For every gram of carbon we are able to, just a gram, for every gram of carbon we're able to sequester, that holds 8 grams of water. This is huge because we have water issues. We haven't had rain for 7 weeks. So weather is becoming extremely unpredictable. Last year, it didn't stop raining. The year before, it never rained at all. This year, we kind of had a little bit of both. We had way too much rain, and now we have no rain. So now we have kind of like the perfect split. It's just kind of like, how do you want this? What do you want? Well, you want a little bit of both? Sure. Like half and half, vanilla and chocolate? Sure. But that's not exactly what we want when it comes to our weather. But here, just what I want you to take away from this is that it's just minute changes. A very simple change, 1 gram, not a lot, of carbon is going to hold 8 grams of water in that soil, which then brings us to water. This right here is a 700-year-old bubble that I took inside when I was down inside the glacier. So I told you I'd get back to that glacier. Bucket list, very small, but that 700-year-old bubble, very cool. So here what we have is the natural water cycle. Sorry, this slide isn't showing up. But what I want you to really kind of pay attention to just briefly in this slide is that all the way over on your left, you have less than 1% surface runoff. You have 20 to 30% interflow, which means the water that is going into the ground. We have 40 to 50% evapotranspiration. That is basically tree sweat. That is the moisture that the plants release into the air. Right here is the perfect example of the natural water cycle. This is where things got thrown off. So in this scenario, this is Mount Katahdin up in Maine. In this scenario, when it rains, the rain is intercepted by the trees, gently set to the ground, where it then may run off on the ground a little bit, but probably not so much. It's going to be absorbed. Then it is going to take days, weeks, or longer for that water to make it all the way down to the lake at the bottom. This is how nature set the system up. This is how we disrupted that system. You will now see we have 20 to 30% evapotranspiration. We have 20 to 40% runoff. Because now, instead of taking days and weeks to make its way to the bottom, we've designed our systems between our hard surfaces, our hard impermeable surfaces, and the way that we manage water. We take that water and we move it away, as we say, in a matter of seconds, in a matter of minutes. And that away is usually into our waterways. That away is part of what is causing so much of the problem. Now, the reason I keep saying away is because I want you to realize we are a blue marble floating in space. There isn't an away. There's no other place for it to go. It just goes elsewhere to be a problem elsewhere. There is no such thing as away. We are our own entity spinning in space. You will also see 0 to 30% interflow, not so much water making it into the soil. So when it doesn't rain, there isn't any water stored in the soil in the first place. This is all very basic. And much of what I'm going to say today is extremely basic. And you're going to be like, yeah, I learned that in 5th grade. Yes, water cycle, 5th grade, but you weren't paying attention then. And actually, we forgot. We forgot, and it's really just by remembering the basics. It's not that complicated. We are making climate change out and how to solve climate change a whole lot more complicated than it has to be. If we just get back to the basics and say, oh, water into the ground. We say, like we see flooding, or we listen to the news, and they'll say, oh, there's a flooding problem, or oh, the streets are flooded. And then we try to solve that flooding problem. The flooding is a symptom. If they said on the news, oh, we're having an infiltration problem in downtown Chelmsford, well, then we'd be like, oh, how do we solve that? Oh, we have to infiltrate the water. When it's a flooding problem, we get the water away. If we recognize that the problem is infiltration, then we're getting the water into the ground. So when we call it what it is, then we can actually fix it. Moving right along to the American lawn. Over 32 million acres of the U.S. is lawn, is turf. Now, I am not a kill your lawn person because there is a place for turf. We have quite too much of it, I believe, 32 million acres. It is the largest crop grown within the United States, and we don't get to eat it. So it is the largest crop grown, and we dump billions and billions of dollars into our lawns. And depending on your point of view and depending on the neighborhood you live in, you may either have a different view on how your lawn should be, or you feel pressured into keeping it. I had a client just yesterday saying, I don't really feel like I can change this because look at my street and my neighbors will hate me. Well, then we are pressured into keeping our lawn the way it is, we think it needs to be. But again, 32 million acres, that's 32 million acres that is essentially inhabitable to anything but us. Now again, I said I'm not a kill your lawn person. Lawns are wonderful to play on. If you've ever walked on grass in bare feet, which is extremely good for your health, walking barefoot on the earth is amazing for your health. Walking on grass in bare feet is a wonderful feeling. It's the cushiest, best carpet since the 70s shag rug. So it is certainly, definitely the way to go. But nothing lives there. So when we're talking about creating habitat, we kind of need to start here. Let's start in our backyard. If it's a place to play, sure. If it's a transition area within your gardens or a way that you can move about your gardens, absolutely, love lawn. Kids certainly need to have some lawn. Entertaining spaces, lawns are great, but we certainly don't need as much as we have, and we don't need to treat it like we do. So my whole piece with lawn is maybe we change the paradigm a bit. Maybe we allow the clover back in. I grew up with violets and clover and everything else in my lawn. You know what? It was evenly green and I could play in it. It's got a good beat and I can dance to it. And that was all I needed. So this kind of homogeneous lawn that we try to create is just a fallacy, and it's actually doing us a disservice. So I would say plant the change you wish to see in the world. So where does that change start? Well, yes, with native plants. You knew I was going to get to native plants? Here we go. Because this is cool. This is cool. As I said, you get out there in nature. We talk oftentimes about, how terrible technology is, and oh my gosh, like our kids and their phones and their everything else. Well, I've found through some of the classes that I teach, some of the kids that I work with, some of the Eagle Scout and Cub Scouts groups that I work with, once you get a child or yourself, Once you start looking at nature and trying to capture pictures like this, then you're going to take this picture and then you're going to be like, oh, what was that plant? Or, ooh, what type of, you want to get real nerdy, like what type of bumblebee was that? But then you start becoming inquisitive, and at least you're noticing. So I'm not a technology hater either. My idea or fear here is, and especially in recent events and with what we're hearing on the news, what I'm noticing, what I'm fearing is, like I said, I grew up in the woods. Very few children are growing up in the woods. Very few children have free play. Very few children can start to identify or flip over rocks. Let's forget identifying a tree. Just flip over a rock. Eat a worm once in a while. Like just something like that. But because we're not doing that, we don't have that connection. Many kids today don't have the same connection that I have with my grandmother identifying partridge berry underneath the leaves on a walk through the conservation land. Like that, I remember that vividly. That's huge. But because we don't have that connection, the youth today are very involved and very knowledgeable about climate change. But without that connection, you're not going to know how to go about to do it. You know, when it becomes your family, think about our family. We're very protective of our family and friends. People we don't know, oh, that's tragic. You know, but if everything becomes your family and you have that connection with it, then you're going to want to care for it and you'll be more apt to care for it. So, why natives? Well, greater climate resilience. We all know, you've probably heard a million times the things I'm about to say. But again, we're going back to basics. Greater climate resilience. Native plants evolved here. Native plants love crappy New England soil. So you don't have to go buy a million fertilizer or anything else because they love our rocky, crappy soil. So that's wonderful. Then they thrive. And when they're thriving, now we're sequestering carbon, whether it be this Monarda punctata right here or whether it be an oak tree that you have. Habitat support. And I say think Yellowstone because if you don't know the Yellowstone story, definitely check it out, because simply by introducing wolves into Yellowstone, they were able to change the shape of the waterways and restore the rivers. They were able to, fish came back. You wouldn't think that if I introduce a wolf, now fish come back. How does that happen? Read the stories because it's too long to say tonight, but it's absolutely fascinating how just the reintroduction of one species changed everything. And I'll just kind of like quick little, giveaway on that. Basically, by regulating the deer and the elk, then the plant life was able to come back. Once the plant life started to come back, other things came back. And then next thing you know, just because the wolf came, now we have fish. Just because the wolf came, now the waterways have changed and they run better than they did before. It's absolutely amazing, but all it takes is just a little disruption. You pull one pin out and everything starts to slide. It's like a big Jenga game. Fewer inputs, as I said. These native plants love our crappy soil, so we don't have to constantly amend them. I'm going to save you at least $25, if not a couple $100 on fertilizer, because you're not going to need it. You're going to learn to leave the leaves and increase the organic matter, which is going to feed the life in your soil, which is going to digest the soil and provide all the nutrients that the plant needs. Boom, now I just saved you $25. You're welcome. Healthy plants increase the carbon cycling. So the more a plant is photosynthesizing, the more sugars it's creating. The more sugars it's creating, the more it's pushing into the soil. And then again, back to the beginning. More soil life we have, healthier plants, and the more carbon that we sequester. And that's exactly how we want that to go. We don't want to take all of the carbon out of the air. We need the CO2 as well in the air. We just need to restore the balance. So we are very much like an all or nothing. Like we are trying to eliminate all CO2 from the air. Well then, what are the trees going to breathe? We certainly don't want to do that. And let me just tell you, if you have studied dinosaurs or the kind of that era at all, the oxygen level of the earth was much higher then, which led to dragonflies with a wingspan like my arm, and spiders that were about this big. More oxygen, bigger bugs. So if you don't like bugs, you don't want to really increase the oxygen that much. Biodiversity is certainly something, what it's all about. We were just talking about the lawn, and like I said, that lawn is doing nothing. Having plants, great. Having more plants, great. Having more types of plants, the best. So why is this? Just in this picture. Now, some people in this room may be looking at this picture and it might just really hurt your sensibilities because this is just straight chaos. And you're like, I don't know what to do with that. Please don't give me that. I understand. I totally understand. This may read chaotic to you. This is very much a natural wild meadow. You can actually have this in a composed form. So you can have all these plants, but have it so they read a little neater to you. What's going on here, though, is that we have so many plants and so many types of plants that above ground, we have dozens and dozens, if not millions, of insects right here in this field. So why is that important? Well, it's important because if somebody is eating, say, this milkweed over here in the foreground, if that has aphids on it, then chances are there is something in here that eats the aphids. Oh, now we just eliminated all the insecticides. Just saved you another $25. You're welcome. So that's where we're going with this, because then we have something that's eating something else, and we have all sorts of habitat. We like birds. We go and we spend lots and lots of money on bird seed. There's all your bird seed right there. It is all happening. We spend lots of money, like I said, on fertilizer and compost. If you just leave this, you don't need to buy that anymore. You need to in the beginning to jumpstart it, but even after that, you won't need to do that anymore. So this diversity, you're supporting the insects. Who eats insects? Birds eat insects. We love birds. We might not like bugs, but we love birds. So let's support those birds. Like I said, we're gardening for habitat. This is how we want this to go. So as I mentioned in that slide, we're supporting this life cycle. So here we have things that caterpillars will eat. We have things that will eat caterpillars. Great, we're winning. And so that's all happening, but it all starts with these plants. And it all starts with these plants in that soil that we started with. Also, the biodiversity underground. This is where we start to alleviate compaction, because here you can see we have roots at all different depths. Why is this important? Because those roots are all pushing sugars into the soil. You see this one all the way over here that almost goes to the end of the slide. Well, that right there is feeding life that far down into the soil, not just up here on the surface. So now we're encouraging all those microbes way down below. Also important. Now, when we're talking about water and infiltrating water, by having all these roots and having all these root depths, the water is going to follow the root because that's the hole in the soil. So now we're pushing the water further and further down into our healthy soil. When we have healthy soil, we have pore space. All the space that I was talking about before. So when we have that pore space, that's going to hold water. Now, just to come back to another small increment you can make, just 1% increase in organic matter on 1 acre of land. So if you own an acre and your organic matter, you get your soil tested and it says it's 5%. By just increasing it to 6%, that 1 acre will hold 20 to 25,000 gallons of water. 1%, 20,000 gallons of water. We want to solve the flooding problem? We have healthy soils. We rethink how we design our built environment, but you are not going to redesign how we build our streets. And you're probably not going to redesign how we build the next Walmart parking lot. However, you can increase the water infiltration on your property. Now, when you get your soil organic matter 6% or a little bit over, if you start hanging out in that range and you have all that life and all that biodiversity, your plants will be able to go 90 days plus without water. They're not going to look gorgeous. Like, don't sign up for a garden tour. Don't put your house on. But 2 years ago, when we had that massive drought, the properties, this is how I proved this to myself. So what I am telling you is what I learned myself. I made all the mistakes, so I'm going to tell you about it so you don't make those mistakes. But those properties I was managing actually survived. Well, the newer properties that I had just taken on and other properties were just dying, plants were dying in droves. But the properties where I had built up that organic matter, built up that pore space where you could almost just stick your fingers, into the soil, those plants were doing just fine because they had water reserves. And what happens underground when we were talking about like the fungi in the soil, the mycorrhizal fungi, you may or may not know this, but it attaches itself to the roots. It forms a relationship. The roots like, here's some sugar. And the fungi's like, cool, I'm going to use that energy to grow down into this teeny tiny little pore space in the soil. So when you need water, now you can get that water right back. So it actually increases the size of your root system, making your plants more resilient. So it's all about that relationship. If you just have roots in soil and you're fertilizing it and it doesn't have that relationship, you are not drought resistant. And if you are using things on your plants and on your garden that is killing the fungi in the soil, then you are not that resistant, because that is key. That relationship between plant and fungus in the soil is key to the power, I guess, or the longevity of the plant, its resilience. So why does all this matter? Well, 30 to 40 million hectares, which is 98 million acres of native vegetation, has been replaced by managed landscapes. Managed landscapes meaning our properties. So what is that? Okay, and we're like, all right, so that's a lot. Sure. Well, putting that in perspective, that is more than all the national parks put together. So if you've ever been to the Grand Canyon, like, whoa, this is big, bigger than that. Okay? And you take that, you take Yellowstone, bigger than that. And then you put them all together, and it's actually more than that, and all the land used for corn in 2014. So now we're taking giant swaths of farmland and all of the areas that we preserved. So like we preserve these areas and like we're good. There's some woods. Look at that. There's an eagle. No, it's not enough. It's not enough. Anybody who's read Doug Tallamy will obviously know that that's not enough. So that's where the homegrown national park movement really started, saying that if we just adapt our properties a little bit and all our properties are connected, then we will definitely thrive together. Studies have shown that use of non-native plants is linked to the decline in abundance in insect biodiversity. Well, okay, we all decide, oh, I don't like bugs. Well, we already talked about this, because the decline in insects has declined the bird population. So we love goldfinches and cardinals, chickadees, my favorite. So we love to have all of those. Well, without the native plants within our landscape, then we are not supporting all those bugs in our landscape. So that clutch of 5 chickadees, you have parent chickadees trying to raise 5 children, it takes 9,000 caterpillars. Well, if you don't have the plants that have those caterpillars, what are they going to do? Now, birds don't feed their babies birdseed. Babies need protein. In fact, if you want me to save you even more money, stop buying birdseed in the spring and summer, because now you're eating out of season, just like we eat strawberries in January. Well, we don't have to force Mother Nature to eat strawberries in January. Mother Nature evolved to eat on a cycle. Birds eat seed in fall. Birds eat seed in winter. That's when their bodies need fat. Birds in spring, birds in summer need protein. They need those insects. They need those caterpillars. They need to raise their young. But why else do we want them eating those caterpillars? Because those caterpillars are eating the investment that we made at Weston Nurseries. So now we have natural insect control. Those birds are going to eat the bugs that we don't want. I am trying very hard not to use the P word. I am trying to remove pest from my vernacular, because I started this whole thing saying we all have a right to be here. So I can't then start calling something a pest. It is just an unwanted insect in the environment that we've created. It is an unwanted guest, but those birds will take care of it for us. At the nursery, we grow a lot of native plants. We do not use any sides on our native plants. No fungicide, no insecticide. Our milkweed gets covered with aphids. Within a couple weeks, you start seeing wasps and lacewings and ladybugs. They just show up. The milkweed never dies. It gets covered. You'll buy the plant, and if you don't know better, you'll be like, oh, this plant's covered in bugs. But that bug population has been readily maintained by the bug population. So what happens is when a plant gets nibbled by a caterpillar, say, it releases scents into the air. It releases a fragrance that a wasp can pick up to 7 miles away. It's kind of like the bat signal. It's the wasp signal. It says, hey, I'm under attack. And 7 miles away, a wasp will be like, oh, that plant is under attack. That must mean it's time for lunch. And they will go and they will find that plant and find that insect and take care of it for you. Now, this introduces the shift in the paradigm with an acceptable threshold of damage. And we'll get to that in a second. So, the plants you choose could save a species. We don't think about this when we're gardening. We don't think about this when we're walking through the nursery. But it's absolutely true, especially these 3 ladies right here. These 3 ladies right here are 3 endangered bumblebee species. And they are actually endangered throughout New England and locally extinct in certain places. Now, how cool is it being a human with the power of choice, knowing that a plant you put in your garden could bring a species back from being endangered, at least locally, at least in your town? That's some cool power. If you want to just take on that power, then I encourage you to go home, wrap a little sheet or a blankie around yourself and just fly around the house, because you make yourself a superhero. So just roll with it. Accept that role. So I do not expect anybody, nor do I want you to necessarily take this down. Here are just 15 plants from Dr. Gigier from UMass Dartmouth. He's identified dozens and dozens of plants that will support those 3 ladies that we just saw. Now, many of these plants right here are actually commonly used in the landscape. So, for instance, Monarda didyma, that's the red bee balm. We put that in our landscape because we want hummingbirds. Cool. But if we put that in our landscape, we're also supporting those bees. The digitalis, the penstemon beard tongue, that's another one commonly used, just by adding that. If you don't have any of these, that's okay too, but agastache, the purple giant hyssop, that's one that's oftentimes in garden centers. By just choosing that plant, you can make a difference. If you go to Dr. Gagir's website, you will see all those plants. Now, not all of those plants are landscape plants. You won't find all of those plants at the nursery, but you will certainly find some of them. And by just choosing some of them, you can have a huge impact. And that's another thing, almost as cool as the ice crystals, that I find about nature. How just a very simple 1%, how a very simple 1 gram can have a huge impact, how a very simple 1 plant or 1 area that we've dedicated to these plants right here can have a huge impact. So where do we start? We begin with the end in mind. Okay. So we begin with the end in mind. So who are you looking to attract? So this is where you get to make your choice, kinda. A good place to start is, and this is not actually a promotion, but I had designed 7 gardens using plants from Dr. Gagir's website, as well as some of my favorites. And I designed 7 gardens. Very teeny gardens. No, I designed 7 gardens, and Weston Nurseries was actually nice enough to put them up on their website. So if you go to Weston Nurseries website, you go to the native plant section, you will see those 7 gardens. So in those 7 gardens, they will look like this. The color representation here is essentially the color of the bloom. The numbers there are the number of plants for each area. Each one of these areas, you do not need to shape it like a kidney, but each one of these areas is 100 square feet. There is a garden for hummingbirds. There's a garden for songbirds. There's a garden for what I call the pollinator powerhouse garden, which is just really supports like all the pollinators. Then there's an endangered pollinator garden, which is really plants selected specifically to support the bumblebees that we were talking about and many other endangered species. What is cool about this? Well, you can say, I like the endangered pollinator garden and I like hummingbirds. Cool. They can all be put together. Because we're using native plants, the color scheme usually matches in between. You can integrate all of those. This was more to give you a jumping off point and a recipe than to be like a map that you follow specifically within your yard. So this is how I like to look at it, and this is how, how I look at it for myself. Think about it like a cuisine that you like. Let's just, for me, Indian cuisine. Love Indian cuisine, okay? I go to the restaurant. I know what I like to order. I don't know what everything is, but I know what I like to order and I like to try new things. Now, when I go home and try to recreate that, I'm not that familiar. So I need a recipe. So I'm following that recipe. Here's your recipe to the cuisine that you are not familiar with. Because we can design with many of the exotic plants that we use. We know how to use peonies. We know how to use, daylilies and everything else. We've been using those. We're familiar with those. But you may not know necessarily how to use a certain native plant, especially in shade areas. So this right here is your recipe. There is a recipe on here, or a garden on here, for the hell strip, the area between the street and the sidewalk where all the dogs pee. Yes, native plants live there too. So it's wonderful because there is a native plant for every situation. And like I said, this is what they look like. So if you want a jumping off point and you want to get some names of some plants that are going to make that impact, like I said, go to the native section of the Weston Nurseries website. So where do we start? We start with, who do we want to attract? Who do we want to be visiting our garden and we want to find? Do we want to support tree frogs and salamanders and the like? Well, we can plant for that, and we can create environments for that. Do we want to see little guys like this? Again, I love finding stuff in nature, so these are all like my cool moments. But do we want to see things like this? Now, the praying mantis, yes, there is a non-native version. Praying mantis doesn't care. The praying mantis kills everything. So it is really like nature's insecticide. It just wipes everything out. However, they're super cool. Super cool, and it's great to introduce your kids, your grandkids, or whatever to them, because whether it's the local version or the non-native version, I still find them cool, and they certainly do their job. Do we want to have more of these? Everybody wants more of these. They're flying flowers. Of course we do. However, every June, and anybody who's seen me speak before, because I say this every time, there are two things that happen every year. So around every, say, July more, not June, somebody who I put a pollinator garden in for the year before calls me up panicking because there are caterpillars eating their plants. I then have to find a sensitive way to say, where do butterflies come from? Without making them feel silly. But that's exactly how it goes, okay? So yes, I put those plants there to be eaten because you want to see more butterflies. Now that is the key when we're creating gardens. We need to support the entire life cycle. So it's not just about putting the pretty flower in to have the butterfly be there. You have to think of nature like you think of yourself. Why do you live where you live, or why did you move where you moved when you had your kids? Great school system, quiet streets. They can learn to ride their bike. They can get really smart in school. It's a wonderful, safe neighborhood. That's exactly what nature wants, all of nature. So the butterflies are going to fly, and they're going to fly to a place where there's plenty of food. Safe place for their young to kind of do their thing. Birds do it, everything does it. You need to support that life cycle. In supporting that life cycle, you need to create the insect or bird version of exactly what you would want for your children. These guys, now, of course, that black and yellow one is the exact one we want to see on our milkweed, unless we don't identify it. However, usually what happens is we see holes in our plants. We freak out because that's our investment, and we just buy something, and it's not praying mantis, that will wipe everything out. And then we say, wow, I put all this money into my pollinator garden, and nobody's here. This little spice bush swallowtail. Love that, adorable. You get the opportunity to see these, it's great. Well, how do you get that? Spice bush, sassafras. But putting either one of those in, great. Then you're going to see that, just like you get milkweed. Now, the milkweed is different. Many of you may know, but the reason the monarch actually works as the poster child is because milkweed was born, and then the monarch started eating it. And then the milkweed and the monarch was like, hey, I can take these toxins because milkweed is poisonous to every other insect, or most other insects. And so the milkweed was like, oh yeah? And it ramped up its toxins. And the monarch was like, oh yeah? And it ramped up its immune system. And it kept kind of going back and forth like that, except the monarch kind of lost because the milkweed is doing its thing, and it can be pollinated by pretty much any insect because they all visit the flowers. However, the monarch caterpillar found itself unable to eat anything else. because its digestive system got so acute to digesting those toxins, you will not find a monarch caterpillar on something else. So that is where the monarch actually works as the poster child, though it is one of the worst pollinators for pollinators, because it is a perfect example how by eliminating certain plants either from our gardens or by eliminating certain plants because we mowed down a field and put up a subdivision, we have actually hurt those populations. By instantly spraying our plants every time we see a hole in it, is how we hurt our populations. Now, if you go into the woods, if you look at nature, you see that the trees that have never been touched or really by anybody have holes in them. That's okay. That's the circle of life. Things eat things, then things eat them. That's how we get here. We eat things. That's how we get here. So it's all how that goes, but we freak out. And we react before we understand. Now, decimation is a different thing. Nibbling's one thing, decimation is another. Love these. These are my two of my favorites. So over there, we have the green sweat bee. As the second graders in Lexington call, that's my girlfriend. So this is my favorite. I tell all the second graders, this is my favorite bee. I love the jewel tone. If you ever see this bee on like a dark purple flower, like spiderwort or something, wow, is she gorgeous. So then by talking and so lovingly about this bee, she was deemed my girlfriend. My other girlfriend, if I had one, would be the giant digger wasp. I'm just in love with these jewel tones. The giant digger wasps, if you plant mountain mint, you are guaranteed to see this. You will see it on other things, but mountain mint and they're like peanut butter and jelly. They will just always be together. And I just love the iridescent wings. Neither one are going to mess with you. I get real close. I actually walk through fields of mountain mint with these guys everywhere and never been stung. Happy bees don't sting. They're busy eating. They're busy doing their thing. They have their whole agenda on their mind. They have a whole hive or nest or something that they have to get back to. They're not worried about you. But again, we kind of think and we get scared of bees. Well, how about we stop and see how cool looking they are and how many different varieties there are. Like, it is extremely interesting. We can create habitats. So something that I've done a lot of is create water gardens. I create water gardens. Some people like koi. I like koi, and I like giving people koi. But I create water gardens for a moment like this, to see this tween. This tween kind of in transition right here. Not quite there yet, but it's moments like that. Are you creating your landscape, again, just to have a moment like this? Is it for the butterflies? Great. Is it for the frogs and the amphibians? That's great too. A lot harder to create a habitat for, but if you have that habitat, it's important to support it. So I am about to embark at the end of October on a restoration project for Eversource. Before I start this project, there is the only course that I have to take. There's a couple required courses. The only one I'm excited about is turtle training. So we are going to really learn how to identify and preserve turtle habitat while we are restoring these areas that are run along power lines. They've all been taken care of. Now we're putting more manageable plant life back. So that's the idea there. That's the job there. Things that aren't going to grow up into the power lines. We're reducing that maintenance and also putting in things that will be able to live there and thrive there without having to be cut down. Well, to do so, you have miles and miles of power line. Well, that goes through some very special areas. So I am very excited for my turtle training. Hopefully I'll see some of you again because I'll be able to tell you all about it. But I also have friends who are very into herpetology and preserving snakes and preserving turtles. One friend in particular you'll be talking to her at like 10:30 at night. She'll be out in the woods with a flashlight and her dog looking for nesting turtles so that she can protect the nest from anything that is going to dig them up. That is dedication to the nth degree. Again, talking about life cycles. Who do you want to have in your yard? If you would like to have lots of birds, then you want to plant free bird seed. And so here we have coneflower and here we have milkweed. but by having coneflower or echinacea, by having black-eyed Susans, by having asters, by having goldenrod, you actually really do, if you plant enough coneflower or any of those, you actually get kind of what I call a second bloom, because in my garden, around the end of October, once the asters and the goldenrod have gone by, I get nothing but purple and gold finches everywhere. And they're just kind of riding the crowns, so it's almost like a second bloom. You get these wonderful spots of color throughout the garden. And I leave my garden standing the whole time because that becomes the seed source. And that becomes a seed source, it becomes a place of habitat. Also, by leaving all of that there, I am protecting the ground itself, the crown of the plant, so we've all been trained to cut everything back. If you would like more pollinators in your pollinator garden, don't cut it down in the fall, because that is where all of those insects overwinter. That is where all the queen bumblebees overwinter. The lunar moth, if you've ever seen a lunar moth, big, green, giant like this, okay, that's there. So if you blow all the leaves off your property, which many landscapes do, you've now blown away your chance at the lunar moth, because that was just overwintering right there in the leaves, and you just took it right out of the equation, along with many other butterflies and moth species that either fall as cocoons or overwinter in some larval state underneath all that leaf litter. So my suggestion to, if you want more pollinators and you want to increase habitat, wait until we get that week of 50-degree weather. Wait until you start to see bees flying around. So you'll see the queens first in like May. When you start seeing bumblebees flying around, those are the queens looking for their next nest. Once you see the queens out, now you know that it is safe to go ahead and cut down your garden. It's because now they've left, so it's like coast is clear. The chances of you wiping out, all the things that you were trying to attract has now severely decreased. Now, when you cut your garden, I am going to suggest you maybe cut everything down to about 8 inches, because there are plenty of bees that like to nest in the hollow stems. They are not the bees that will sting you, but they are the bees that don't create these big hives that you're going to bump into. They're just going to lay a few larvae or a few eggs in that hollow stem. They're solitary bees, like carpenter bees, mason bees, things like that. They're solitary bees. They're just going to use that little short stem and raise their young. So if you leave 8 inches, now of course, right when you do it, not a whole lot has started to grow. So there will be a week or two where you're looking at kind of sticks in your garden. However, if you plant heavily, and if you have plenty of native plants in there, by mid to end of May, all those sticks are gone, because all the plant matter has come up. You don't see it anymore. So the way I maintain, I'll just tell you real quickly, because I think I only have quickly, I'll tell you real quickly my whole garden cycle. So in the spring, once all that has happened, I cut everything down to about 8 inches. Say my garden bed is 6 to 8 feet deep. I take all that stuff that I cut down, I chop it up real small, and I leave it on like the back 6 feet. And then the front 2 feet, I edge like a landscaper, and I put down leaf mulch. So when you first see my garden, it looks a little weird because there's this brown mulch stripe along the front, and then it looks just like all these leaves and stuff just left there. Now, the edge right there is just to kind of make it look garden-y, and then the rest of it is all going to decompose right back into the soil. Now, what happens when all that plant matter decomposes? All the minerals that it took up, the fertilizer, goes back into the soil. So you don't need to add compost, and you don't need to add fertilizer, because that stalk right there has all the minerals that you're going to be getting in your fertilizer bag. It goes right back into the soil. So that's what you want to be doing. When you create for habitat, this is what you see. This is my backyard. If you build it, they will come. And if you sit still long enough for nature to come back around, you get to see some pretty cool things. Things like this. This is one of my clients' backyards. So we built a water feature there because she has lots and lots of native plants, wanted to increase the bird life. If you have water in your landscape, especially water like a fountain or running water, the birds will come and come and come. So she wanted to have more birds and more habitat, and lo and behold, she has hummingbirds galore, which she didn't have before. This is all in Lexington, not necessarily known for its, biodiversity. It's known for its lawns. You find things like this. When you plant it, when you leave it, you will have moments like this, which are just, very precious, but also let you know that you're doing it right. So what happens with us is we second guess ourselves, or we watch too many YouTube videos, and they're like, I don't know what I'm doing. Did I do this right? Nature will let you know. If your plant is thriving, if you find that salamander, if you find something like this, you're obviously going in the right direction. But you don't get to choose. Okay? So you don't necessarily get to choose all the wildlife that comes. Just like these guys too. We may want the green sweat bee, my girlfriend, hope you see her, but you may not get to choose, and yes, there may be yellow jackets. Now, things to know about yellow jackets, so you might give them a little leeway. Yellow jackets we don't see, nor do we really care about for the majority of the summer. Yellow jackets become a problem end of summer and fall. Why? Because all these ladies here have spent the entire summer raising their young. This is their first time out of the house, and they are starving. They are so hungry, so they're a little hangry, and so they don't have much patience for us. So give them a little leeway. If you've ever been a parent in a house taking care of kids all day long, you want to get out too, and you might be a little crazy yourself. So just saying. So just kind of give them a little leeway, please. But again, like this shot right here was just so cool because, again, happy bees don't sting. So I was get right up on them and just kind of enjoy this moment. So again, finally, what we're trying to do is look at your environment. Look at your soil compaction. Maybe take a soil test and look at your organic matter, or just start adding organic matter. It can be in the form of compost, or just leave the leaves this winter. Just allow all of that to begin to decompose, because again, that 1% is very important. So look at your environment, adjust your environment. Think of the life cycle of what you are trying to have. If you would like more butterflies or you would like more pollinators, think about their life cycle. Don't just give them, don't just give the hummingbird, there's one slide that wasn't on here, don't just give the hummingbird red flowers. Because the one slide that I didn't get to show you this evening was cinnamon fern. Hummingbirds use the down of cinnamon fern to line their nest. You wouldn't think that a green fern growing in the shade has anything to do with hummingbirds. Nope. As that cinnamon fern is beginning to unfurl and is covered in the down, they collect all of that and they line their nest. Think about the life cycle that you're trying to do. Birds need food. They need caterpillars. To have those caterpillars, you need native plants. And then they're going to need seed. Now, here's the thing. Here's the reason to still purchase bird seed, because I'm not anti-bird seed either. It's all about balance. So there isn't enough native plant and native seed material out there to support all of our songbirds for the winter. So go ahead and help them out in the winter, because we're trying to restore the balance. And in the meantime, until we have populations enough of all that native seed, then we need to help them out. So go ahead and do that. But also help them out on the other end where they're raising their young. Give them a good school system. Give them healthy water. Give them safe streets to ride their bikes on. And then again, it all starts, which is the last one here, but it really does all start with your goals. What are you trying to do? Are you creating a pollinator garden? Are you creating a bird garden? Are you just trying to create overall habitat? Do you have a massive property where you can leave a brush pile that will support animals? You can also, if you have a small property, and this is what I do oftentimes in my gardens, is I kind of go and pillage the dump section of the nursery where everybody puts all their stumps and all the logs and stuff, and I find like a really cool stump or a really cool log, and then I add the gardens that I'm designing. I don't charge anybody, it was free for free. So, but I like to add it there because it's basically a sculpture. But as that sculpture begins to decompose, it's now providing plenty of home and food for different pollinators, insects, etc. So just doing that. So if you find a cool stump or you have a log, maybe you just tuck that in. I'm not saying leave the whole tree on your property, but if there is like a stump or a log, or if you have some work done on your property, maybe tuck that into your garden. Really cool, because like you'll see it in the winter, you'll see it in the spring, then all the plants will come up around it, you won't see it, then fall will happen or winter will happen, and then it'll be there again. You'll be like, oh, the cool stump I got, I forgot about that, because it disappears in all the plants. So but it's good to have it, because in the meantime, when you weren't thinking about it, there was plenty of things thinking about it. So just supporting those life cycles and just choosing your goal. And you can choose all the goals, or you can choose one. If you want to start small, start with a pollinator garden, or start with a bird garden. And they're almost the same thing, because if you have the native plants to support birds, you have the native plants to support pollinators. If you don't know where to start, go check out those gardens. It's free. It's not a come shop at Weston Nurseries. It's a here's the plant list, get them where you get them. Would love for you to shop at Weston, love for you to contact me. In fact, you can contact me right here. So should you have any gardening endeavors, please go ahead, TrevorS@WestonNurseries.com. Feel free to reach out to me. If you want to see all the crazy things that I've been up to over the years, and you're on Instagram, go to Re-Earth Boston. That basically has my past 15 or so years whenever Instagram came out. If you want to see what's happening at Weston Nurseries, go to Trevor Smith Weston Nurseries, or Trevor Weston Nurseries, also on Instagram. I'm also constantly putting videos out on the Weston Nurseries website about many things, about how to turn your bird bath into a pollinator watering station, about how to use the clearance section of the nursery to actually fulfill many of your landscape goals on a shoestring. So there's plenty of stuff out there. I am about to shoot a video later on, so it should be coming out soon, but I'll be shooting a video later on this week all about cold season veggies and cold season flowers. And when we kind of dwindle down into the season, if you are a vegetable gardener, why you want to start thinking about that now, how you can think about that now, and how you can also use them in very ornamental ways. So I love just kind of putting these things out there, because the idea is to empower and inspire you. So that's certainly what I'm looking for. But again, Trevor S@Weston Nurseries. If you decide to have a pollinator garden, you just want to ask me questions, go ahead and ask me questions. People do it all the time. Now, every Tuesday night, essentially from April to October, every Tuesday night, 6 to 7, there is a free kind of come hang out. And you can come hang out and you can ask all your questions. So you just log on, it's a Zoom thing, you just log on to Zoom and you just ask your gardening questions, or you can just listen to all the other questions that are going on. It's a great if you are trying to get into your garden, or if all of a sudden, like you discovered that your lilac looks totally dead right now. Well, your lilac looks totally dead right now because we had lots and lots of rain, then we had a week of dry humid, and then lots of rain and a week of dry humid, and that was basically set the stage for numerous blights and fungal diseases that have totally gone all over the lilac. Now, every lilac I have checked, when people call panicking saying it's dead, I'm like, it's not dead. It's not dead, it just lost its leaves early. So, you know, don't be worried about that. But if you have those questions, 6 to 7 on Tuesday nights, we certainly have about 4 weeks left or so before that's over this year, and then it starts all over again. So definitely check out Weston Nurseries. And again, between the newsletter and the social media, I try to put out as many videos as possible, again, just to kind of inspire and empower you. You've been a wonderful audience. Thank you so much. Have a great night.